Today we have a strategic masterclass from the great Jose Raul Capablanca. His opponent, none other than Aaron Nimzovich. This game was played in 1927 at the New York International Masters, and we will see how Capablanca is a genius with handling pawn structures in this game. Nimzovich has white, Capablanca has black, and Nimzovich begins with e4. Capablanca plays c6, or the Caro-Kann defense. The idea is to create this strong point at d5, but leave this bishop unblocked. e5 is played by Nimzovich, gaining space in the middle of the board. Bishop to f5. Black wants to play e6, but he wants to get the bishop outside of the pawn chain before doing it. He doesn't want to block the bishop in by playing e6. And Nimzovich plays bishop to d3. A playable move. The one thing about this, though, and Capablanca does trade here, is that you notice the light squared bishop was the good bishop because the dark squares are blocked by these pawns, whereas Capablanca's bad bishop was his light squared bishop. So black got rid of his bad bishop for white's good bishop. But white has more space and a bit of development. Black plays e6, knight to c3 from white, and queen to b6. Capablanca seems to be violating one of the rules of chess openings. Wait to develop your queen. But there's a good reason here. The strategic idea for black is to play c5. This queen supports that push while also putting pressure on d4 and hitting b2, making it hard to develop this bishop at c1. White plays knight g to e2 and c5 from Capablanca, challenging this d4 pawn. And white has a lead in development, but what Capablanca is banking on is that the more closed structure will sort of mute that advantage from white. White takes on c5, bishop takes c5. Now Capablanca is threatening bishop takes f2 check. Nimzovich, of course, just castles to avoid that. And here, Capablanca makes an interesting decision. He plays knight to e7. And what this does, it allows Nimzovich to take off this very nice dark squared bishop. And that's what he does. He plays knight to a4, which hits the queen and the bishop, and when the queen moves, he takes the bishop, and queen takes knight. And it looks like what Capablanca wants to do is play with these knights. He wants to show that these knights are going to be better than this knight and this bishop at c1. So there's a real battle between the minor pieces here. Nimzovich plays bishop to e3, hitting the queen. The queen goes to c7, keeping an eye on this e5 pawn, which Nimzovich immediately defends with f4, gaining space. But now knight to f5. And this is a very nice square for this knight, f5. It's very hard to eject it from this square because g4 would weaken the king at g1. So this is a well-placed knight here at f5. White plays c3 to keep control over d4. Knight to c6, rook a to d1. And now g6, strengthening control of the light squares, adding a little more support to this knight at f5. And here Nimzovich goes right in and plays g4. Kicking that knight away. The one problem, though, for white is that there's so much air around this king that this g4 move is a bit risky, even though it's kicking a knight from a good square. Capablanca takes the bishop at e3, queen retakes, and this next move from Capablanca, very instructive. He sees this structure, which has a lot of space but is a bit unwieldy. So what Capablanca does is he plays h5, immediately challenging this structure. And the best move for white here is probably to just play f5, which gives up some material but leads to a lot of complications with white having lead in development. Black is still a bit better here, but this was probably Nimzovich's best decision to make it messy. The worst decision he could make here, well, maybe not the worst, but well, maybe it is, would be to take the pawn, in which case Capablanca would just play rook takes h5, and this is a dominant structure for black. This is probably just winning. These pawns are weak. He can play on the h file. White has no pawn breaks. That would be a mistake. But the move Nimzovich makes is also, I think, a mistake. He plays the move g5, gaining space. And some people may say, well, gaining space is good, right? Well, the reason it's a mistake here is by locking up this structure, Nimzovich has no pawn breaks on the king side, which gives Capablanca all of the freedom he needs. He can be safe on the king side and attack on the queen side. So he goes ahead and castles. So although white has this space, the king is safe because there are just no pawn breaks. Knight to d4 from white, queen to b6 pins that knight. The queen is undefended at e3. Rook to f2, rook f to c8, planning to activate on the c file. a3, rook to c7, rook to d3. There's some maneuvering here. This the knight hits b3 and c4, but this c4 square will be a key pivot point for Capablanca's pieces, both knight and rook. Rook to e2. Now here, rook to e8, sort of an overly safe move, almost like he's trying to prepare against an f5 pawn sacrifice, which probably wouldn't be a good idea either. But rook to e8 just keeps it safe, forces white to make a move. King to g2, knight to c6, challenging the knight at d4, rook e to d2, and now the rook comes back to c8, playing on the half-open c file. Rook to e2, both sides at the moment just shuffling their pieces, but now knight to e7. The knight aims for that nice f5 square, which is now a permanent weakness, and the rook aims at c4, where it can shift and try to enter into white's position. Rook e to d2, rook goes to c4, queen to h3, potentially sacking on e6. It doesn't work right now because the queen defends it, but it's just something black has to pay attention to. King to g7, rook to f2, a5, gaining space on the queen side, and here black could play a4, creating a backwards pawn on b2 and a weakness on b3, or he could shift the queen to a6 and play b5, b4, a minority attack, creating a weakness on the queen side. After rook to e2, Capablanca does something that looks a bit surprising. He plays knight to f5. And the reason is because white can trade off that knight in this position, and he does. Knight takes f5, gf5, and we see Capablanca has left his h-pawn hanging, but it would be a really bad decision to take that pawn. If Nimzovich had taken the pawn, then rook to h8, queen to f3, and then rook to h4, and white is just lost here. The threat of rook to g4 check followed by queen to g1 mate. There are just too many threats. Obviously, the rook is attacking. Both rooks are attacking f4. Rook to g4 check. The game would be over in that case. So he's not going to take that pawn at h5. Instead, Nimzovich plays the queen to f3, but now king to g6, locking that up, keeping that pawn safe for the moment. Rook e to d2, and now rook to e4. We see Capablanca beginning to inch his way in, slowly but surely. His pieces slowly find better squares. Rook to d4 to challenge that rook, but now rook to c4. Wants to keep that rook right where it is. If here white plays rook takes c4, rook c4, say queen to f2. The idea here, of course, is this queen to a6, b5, b4 minority attack. Queen to f2, that's what he would do. Probably just queen to a6. And after rook to d4, he can take on d4, and white would be faced with a bad choice. If he takes with the queen, then queen to e2 check, hitting the king and the pawn. Queen to f2 basically forced, but then queen to g4 check, queen to g3, and then this would be the tough thing for white. It'd move h4, forcing queen takes and then pawn takes, and this is an easily winning endgame for black. He could just enter his king in. He's got this 2-1 majority, and this is just going to be a total win here. And if white takes with the pawn on d4, then queen to d3, and this queen is too dominant. And it's important to notice this position because it's a subtext for what happens right after. Capablanca is trying to create this specific position as the game progresses. So after queen to f2, he plays queen to b5, so that if the rooks get traded off, the queen can land on d3 while keeping pressure on b2. King to g3, rook c d4, and now, again, he takes with the pawn. If he takes with the rook, then we can see a situation where the queen would end up back on d3. So cd4, queen to c4, attacking the pawn twice. It's defended twice, but you notice white is just basically running out of moves here. Everything is attacked, and any move sort of weakens white's position. King to g2, b5, black just advances on the queen side. King to g1, b4, ab4, ab4, king g2, and now queen to c1. The queen and the rook are infiltrating white's position. King to g3, queen to h1, now with the threat of rook to e1, followed by Perhaps rook to g1 check, possibly, or rook to f1. Rook to d3. White just can't find a move. Rook to e1. Rook to f3 to try to cover the f1 square. Then rook to d1 again. White has a hard time finding anything to do. He plays b3. Now this weakens the c3 square, and black could try to get a hold of that square. He does play rook to c1. And after rook to e3, rook to c3 is fine, but Capablanca plays a much stronger move here. He plays the move rook to f1. And in this position, Nimzovich resigned. And here's the reason. After the queen moves, obviously if the queen goes to g2, rook to g1 would just pin it. So after, say, queen to e2, queen to g1 check, white has no good choices. If king to h3, then just rook to f2 with a double attack on the queen, along with the threat of rook takes h2 mate. That would be it. And if he tries to block with the queen, then the rook is left hanging on e3 and just queen takes rook. Check. Really amazing how Capablanca is able to work his pieces into that position and play on the queen side and take advantage of that locked structure. Truly a master class in how to handle pawns from Capablanca. I hope you've enjoyed the game. See you again soon at Chess Dog. Goodbye.